Christmas Eve, 11:32 p.m. I found my daughter shivering in the snow outside her in-laws' house. While the Morrison family celebrated warmly inside, golden light streaming from every window, Christmas music playing, laughter echoing into the night, my 27-year-old daughter Claire was locked outside in 12-degree weather. Hypothermia, blue lips, violent shaking. I wrapped my coat around her trembling body, feeling how dangerously cold her skin was. My little girl, the same child I'd taught to ride a bike, walked down the aisle 3 years ago, watched become a teacher who loved her students, now reduced to a shivering figure abandoned in the snow like garbage. "Dad," she whispered through chattering teeth, "they said I don't deserve Christmas warmth until I learn respect." The sound of Christmas carols drifted from their house, warm, safe, celebrating, while my daughter nearly froze to death on their doorstep. That's when the rage hit me. Not hot anger, but cold, calculated fury. The kind that had kept me alive through 2 tours in Iraq. The kind that destroys enemies completely. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic, calculated, war. And the Morrison family had just targeted the wrong soldier's daughter. They wanted to play games with my child's life? Fine, let's play. The fluorescent lights at Fairview Medical Center buzzed with that sterile hospital hum I remembered from my Army days. The sound of institutions that never sleep, where life and death decisions get made under artificial daylight 24 hours a day. 23 minutes from driveway to emergency room. I timed it automatically, documenting everything like the old sergeant in me demanded. In the service, accurate timing could mean the difference between successful evacuation and losing a soldier. Tonight, it meant the difference between saving my daughter and losing her to exposure. The triage nurse took one look at Claire and moved us to the front of the line. Her professional assessment was quick and thorough. Core temperature 94.2 degrees, mild hypothermia, but another hour outside could have progressed to moderate or severe. Dangerous territory, especially for someone Claire's size. I watched them wrap thermal blankets around my daughter's small frame, layer after layer of heated fabric that made soft rustling sounds as the nurses worked with practiced efficiency. The sound of her teeth finally stopping their violent chattering was like a prayer being answered. Color began returning to her lips, pale pink replacing that terrifying blue. "Mr. Pennington?" The attending physician approached with that careful tone doctors use when they're about to tell you something you don't want to hear. A tone I recognized from military hospitals where they'd briefed me on soldiers who weren't coming home. "Has your daughter been experiencing any domestic issues we should know about?" I looked at Claire, hoping she'd speak up, hoping she'd finally tell someone what was happening to her. Instead, she turned her face to the wall, staring at the generic hospital artwork like it contained secrets she was afraid to share. "What makes you ask that question, doctor?" I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. Dr. Martinez, his name tag read, Dr. James Martinez, Emergency Medicine, pulled out a tablet and scrolled through what I assumed were medical records. "This is her 4th visit to our ER in 18 months, he said quietly, positioning himself so Claire couldn't hear. 2 suspicious falls requiring treatment for injuries, 1 apparent panic attack requiring sedation, and now exposure. There's a documented pattern here that raises red flags." The beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence between us. Claire's vitals were stabilizing, blood pressure returning to normal, heart rate slowing from the panic rhythm it had maintained during the drive. But something else was falling apart in that sterile room. My understanding of my daughter's life, my assumptions about her marriage, my belief that she would come to me if she was in trouble. That's when she spoke, so quietly I almost missed it over the ambient noise of medical equipment. They said I don't deserve Christmas warmth until I learn respect for family hierarchy. The words hit me like a punch to the chest, each syllable landing with the force of revelation. In my 61 years on this earth, including 2 tours in Iraq where I'd seen the worst of human cruelty, I'd never felt rage build so slowly, so methodically, so completely as it did in that moment. But rage without strategy is just noise. Emotion without tactical planning is just chaos. And I was a soldier before I was a father, which meant I knew how to channel fury into effective action. Dr. Martinez was watching my face carefully. Mr. Pennington, we're going to need to file a mandatory report with social services. Adult Protective Services will want to interview your daughter. Good, I said, pulling out my notebook. I want everything documented. Every word she said, every medical finding, every photograph of her condition. I want a paper trail that could hold up in federal court. The doctor's eyebrows raised slightly. Federal court? Doctor, I spent 23 years in the Army investigating everything from supply chain fraud to war crimes. What happened to my daughter tonight wasn't random abuse. It was systematic. And systematic crimes require systematic evidence to prosecute. I started writing in my field journal, the same olive green notebook I'd carried through Baghdad and Fallujah. Time, date, location, witnesses, medical staff names, Claire's exact words about not deserving warmth. Everything a prosecutor would need to establish timeline and credibility. Mr. Pennington, Dr. Martinez said carefully, what exactly are you planning to do with this information? I looked at my daughter, small and fragile under the hospital blankets, finally sleeping peacefully for what I suspected was the first time in months. Then I looked back at the doctor. I'm going to destroy the people who did this to her, legally, systematically, and completely. I pulled out my notebook, the same field journal I'd carried overseas, leather cover worn smooth from years of use, and started writing with the methodical precision that had kept my unit alive in hostile territory. Time, date, location, witnesses, medical staff names, Claire's exact words. Everything documented in handwriting that would be admissible in court, backed up with digital photos and video recordings. The Purple Heart pinned inside my jacket caught the hospital light as I wrote, the small piece of metal that represented my own encounter with enemy action, a reminder of what happens when you underestimate your opponent's willingness to fight back. The Morrison family had just made their first tactical error. They'd hurt a soldier's daughter and assumed I wouldn't have the skills or determination to respond. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. Claire was dozing now, color fully returned to her cheeks, breathing steady and normal. I stepped into the hallway where the ambient noise of hospital activity, distant conversations, medical equipment beeping, the soft sound of nurses' shoes on linoleum, provided cover for a conversation I needed to have. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years, but one that was permanently etched in my memory. Raymond, it's Harvey Pennington. Yeah, I know it's Christmas Eve, and I'm sorry to call this late. I need to talk to you about a case. Domestic abuse, financial crimes, possibly federal conspiracy? No, Ray. Not someone else's daughter. Mine. Detective Raymond Collins had served under me in the 82nd Airborne before joining Minneapolis PD's Financial Crimes Unit. If anyone would understand the gravity of what I was asking, and the level of precision I intended to bring to this investigation, it was Ray. He'd seen me coordinate complex operations under fire. He knew I didn't make calls like this unless I was deadly serious. Harvey, his voice sharpened immediately, shedding any trace of holiday casualness. What do you need? A briefing on evidence collection procedures for civilian domestic abuse cases, chain of custody requirements for financial documents, protocols for building cases that'll hold up in federal court. And Ray, this is reconnaissance phase. Whatever I find, I'm building a prosecution case that'll end with federal racketeering charges. And the hospital corridor was quiet, except for the distant sounds of medical equipment and muffled conversations from patient rooms. Somewhere in this building, doctors were saving lives through medical intervention, but my mission was different now, and it required a different kind of precision. You want to meet tomorrow? Ray asked. 0800 hours at your office. I'll bring everything I've documented so far. Harvey, before we do this, are you sure you want to go down this road? Domestic abuse cases can get complicated, especially when there's family money involved. I thought about Claire's words. I don't deserve Christmas warmth until I learn respect. I thought about her shivering in 12-degree weather, while her in-laws celebrated inside. I thought about the systematic nature of what I was already beginning to understand. Ray, they made this complicated when they decided to wage war against my family. Now they're going to learn what happens when you target someone who knows how to fight back. After hanging up, I returned to Claire's bedside and sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, watching her sleep. At some point during the night, she stirred and opened her eyes, focusing on me with more clarity than I'd seen in months. "Dad," she said softly, "they're going to be so angry when they find out you brought me here." "Let them be angry," I said, showing her my notebook with its growing list of documented evidence. "Claire, I need you to understand something. What happened tonight wasn't just abuse. It was a tactical error on their part. They exposed themselves, and now I'm going to use that exposure to take them down." She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "You really think you can stop them?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out my Purple Heart, setting it on the hospital table where she could see it. "Sweetheart, I fought enemies who had armies, artillery, and air support. The Morrison family has money and local reputation. They're not even close to the most dangerous opponents I've faced." For the first time in months, I saw something I'd thought was lost forever. Hope returning to my daughter's eyes. "What's the plan, Dad?" I smiled, feeling the familiar calm that comes when tactical planning begins. "We're going to save your future, and we're going to do it so thoroughly that no one will ever underestimate the Pennington family again." The next morning, I was back at Fairview Medical Center at 0800 hours sharp, dressed in my best civilian clothes and carrying a briefcase that contained legal documents Raymond had helped me prepare overnight. The patient advocate's office opened at 8, and I needed those records before anyone had a chance to make them disappear or classify them in ways that would complicate access. "Mr. Pennington," the patient advocate said, sliding a thick manila folder across her polished desk. Sandra Williams, according to her nameplate, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and the sort of professional competence that comes from years of helping families navigate medical bureaucracy. "I've pulled everything we have on Claire Morrison for the past 2 years per your veteran's family rights request and the court order your police friend helped expedite." The folder was heavier than I'd expected, which told me immediately that Claire's medical history was more extensive than either she or Dr. Martinez had initially indicated. I opened it methodically, photographing each page before reading, establishing a digital backup system that would preserve evidence even if the originals were somehow lost or damaged. October 15th, 2023. Laceration on left palm requiring 6 stitches. Listed cause: kitchen accident while preparing dinner for extended family gathering. The photographs showed a clean, deep cut, consistent with a sharp blade, but the angle was wrong for a typical cooking accident, more consistent with defensive wound when trying to block something. March 3rd, 2024, bruised ribs, difficulty breathing, x-rays showing no fractures but significant soft tissue trauma. Listed cause: fell down basement stairs while doing laundry. But the bruising pattern in the photographs showed multiple impact points, not the linear progression you'd expect from tumbling downstairs. August 12th, 2024, severe anxiety attack requiring sedation, blood pressure spiking to dangerous levels. Listed cause: work stress and family pressure. Notes indicated Claire had been found hyperventilating in her car in the hospital parking lot, unable to speak coherently for 20 minutes. December 24th, 2024, hypothermia, core temperature 94.2 degrees. Listed cause: locked outside family residence during winter weather. Each incident was documented with digital photographs stored in the hospital's secure server system, backed up off-site per medical privacy regulations. I photographed every page with my phone, uploaded backup copies to 3 separate cloud accounts with military-grade encryption, and printed hard copies for physical evidence storage in my home safe. The pattern was becoming crystal clear. Every major injury occurred within 48 to 72 hours of Claire's monthly teaching salary being deposited into her checking account. $2,700, direct deposit, second Friday of each month from the Bloomington Public School District. Someone was making sure she was too hurt, too scared, or too medicated to notice what happened to her money after that deposit hit her account. I called Raymond from the hospital parking lot, sitting in my truck with the engine running and heat on full blast. "Ray, I need you to run financial records on Brandon Morrison," I said. "Bank accounts, credit reports, debt obligations, and check gambling debt databases while you're at it. I have a theory about motive." The click of my pen closing the notebook sounded final in the quiet truck cab. Evidence item number 1: comprehensive medical documentation establishing pattern of abuse correlating with financial cycles, securely backed up across multiple systems, chain of custody maintained through official channels. Ready for court presentation. But this was just the beginning. If Claire's injuries followed her pay schedule, then someone was tracking her finances closely enough to know exactly when she'd have money available. That level of surveillance suggested systematic financial monitoring, which meant digital evidence trails. And digital evidence, I'd learned in my Army intelligence training, always tells the truth. Claire had given me full access to her banking through a power of attorney document we'd signed that morning, her hands still shaking slightly as she wrote her name, but her resolve absolutely steady. Smart girl. She understood that I needed to see everything, no matter how embarrassing or painful, if we were going to build a case strong enough to stop this permanently. I set up my laptop in her empty apartment that evening, the silence almost deafening after years of hearing her laughter echo through these rooms during our regular Sunday dinners. The apartment felt hollow now, not just quiet, like someone had systematically drained all the joy and comfort from the space. Empty picture frames where family photos used to sit, bare walls where Claire's teaching certificates and student appreciation letters had hung. Even her bookshelves were mostly empty, just a few old textbooks remaining. Now I understood why she'd grown so quiet during our recent visits, why she'd stopped inviting me over for meals, why she always seemed nervous and distracted. This wasn't her home anymore. It was a place where she was allowed to exist, under conditions determined by someone else. Her checking account told the story with mathematical precision. $2,700 deposited every second Friday from Bloomington Public Schools, then systematic withdrawals starting the following Monday. $500 here, $800 there, always signed electronically with her digital authorization, but occurring at times when, according to her medical records, she was often injured or sedated. I recorded my screen as I scrolled through 18 months of bank statements, narrating each transaction pattern for audio documentation. The withdrawals went to 3 different Morrison family accounts: Brandon's personal checking account at First National Bank, Morrison's Garden Center business account at Community Trust, and something called Morrison Family Trust, managed by William Morrison Sr. The total amount made my stomach clench with rage. $34,600 stolen from my daughter's teaching salary over 18 months. Money she'd earned working with children, staying late for parent conferences, spending her own funds on classroom supplies because the school budget couldn't cover everything her second graders needed. But the business account transfers were especially revealing. According to the documentation, Claire was listed as a full-time employee of Morrison's Garden Center, earning $402 monthly for administrative and bookkeeping services. The problem was, she'd never worked there a day in her life. She was teaching second grade at Oakwood Elementary 40 hours a week, with dozens of witnesses who could confirm her daily presence in the classroom. Someone was using her identity for systematic tax fraud while simultaneously draining her legitimate income. The sophistication suggested this wasn't Brandon's gambling debts driving random theft. This was an organized operation with multiple revenue streams. I saved everything to military-grade encrypted drives, uploaded copies to federal evidence servers through Raymond's police department access, and printed transaction summaries organized by date, amount, and destination account. By midnight, I had enough financial evidence to prove systematic theft, identity fraud, and tax evasion. The next step was understanding exactly how they were accessing her accounts and forging her authorizations. That would require examining her computer and phone for malware, keyloggers, or unauthorized access software. And if I found evidence of digital intrusion, this case would escalate from state-level financial crimes to federal computer fraud charges. Nancy Rodriguez lived 3 houses down from the Morrisons, in a modest ranch-style home with a well-maintained garden and a view of their driveway through her kitchen window. When I knocked on her door that Tuesday morning at 0930 hours, she answered with nervous eyes and hands that trembled slightly as she gripped the doorframe. "Mr. Pennington," she said, glancing over my shoulder toward the Morrison house before quickly ushering me inside. "I heard about Christmas Eve through the neighborhood network. Is Claire okay? Really okay?" The smell of fresh coffee drifted from her kitchen, mixing with the sound of morning news on her television, and the normal sounds of suburban life continuing while my daughter's world had fallen apart. Nancy's home felt warm and lived in, filled with family photos and the comfortable clutter of people who actually enjoyed being there, such a contrast to Claire's sterile apartment. "She's recovering," I said, accepting the coffee mug she offered. "Nancy, I need to ask you about what you've seen over the past year. Anything unusual between Claire and the Morrison family? Any conversations you've overheard? Incidents you've witnessed? Changes in behavior patterns?" Her hands wrapped tighter around her coffee mug, the ceramic making a soft clinking sound against her wedding ring as she set it down with nervous precision. "Harvey, They warned all the neighbors about getting involved in family business, said Claire was having mental health issues, and that we shouldn't encourage her delusions or interfere with their attempts to help her." "And what kind of delusions?" Nancy walked to her kitchen window, pointing toward the Morrison driveway where Brandon's BMW was parked next to Victoria's Mercedes SUV. "They said she was imagining persecution, making up stories about being mistreated, acting paranoid about money. Victoria Morrison told everyone at the neighborhood association meeting that Claire needed professional help but was refusing treatment." I pulled out my notebook, writing carefully. "When was this neighborhood meeting?" "October 12th. Victoria gave this whole presentation about recognizing signs of mental illness in family members and how sometimes you have to make tough decisions to protect someone from themselves." October 12th, 3 days before Claire's first documented emergency room visit for the palm laceration. The Morrisons had been establishing their narrative before escalating their physical abuse, creating community cover for what they were planning to do. "Nancy, I need to ask you something important. Have you seen or heard anything that contradicts their story about Claire's mental health?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. Then she looked up with determination I recognized from soldiers who'd finally decided to tell the truth about combat situations. "Harvey, I've got ring cameras covering my front yard and side garden. They pick up audio from their property too, and they're connected to cloud storage with automatic backup. And I've been recording everything since October because something felt wrong about Victoria's presentation." My pulse quickened with the recognition of a breakthrough. "Show me." Nancy led me to her home computer, logging into her Ring account with quick, nervous keystrokes. The footage was extensive and damning. October 14th, 9:15 p.m. Brandon Morrison screaming at Claire in their driveway, calling her worthless, crazy, and a financial drain on the family, while she stood motionless, holding grocery bags, as neighbors watched from their windows. November 22nd, 7:30 p.m. Victoria Morrison physically blocking Claire from entering the house while she carried what appeared to be Thanksgiving dinner supplies, forcing her to stand in cold rain for 47 minutes before finally allowing her inside. December 15th, 8:45 p.m. William Morrison Sr. pacing their front yard while talking on his cell phone, his voice clearly audible. "The teacher account is ready for the next transfer. She won't notice anything until after the holidays, and by then it'll be too late for her to do anything about it." Each video was automatically stored on Nancy's cloud account with GPS timestamps, weather data, and audio quality sufficient for courtroom presentation. Legally obtained surveillance from private property with no expectation of privacy for the subjects, completely admissible in court. "Nancy," I said carefully, studying her face, "have they threatened you directly about these recordings?" She nodded toward her husband's landscaping truck in their driveway. Rodriguez Lawn Care, painted in neat letters on the side. Miguel's been doing their lawn service and snow removal for 8 years. Victoria told him he'd lose the contract if we helped Claire with anything. We need that money, Harvey. It's 40% of our annual income. I understood completely. The Morrisons weren't just isolating Claire. They were systematically controlling the economic relationships of everyone who might help her. Classic counterintelligence strategy: neutralize potential allies by threatening their financial security. What if I told you that helping Claire now could protect your family from becoming their next targets? Nancy's eyes widened. What do you mean? Nancy, what they're doing to Claire isn't random abuse. It's a systematic operation targeting vulnerable people with access to steady income. Teachers, veterans, anyone with predictable financial resources they can exploit. If they succeed with Claire, they'll move on to other families in this neighborhood. I could see her processing this information, connecting dots she'd been afraid to examine. You think they've done this before? I think they're doing it right now to multiple families, and I think your recordings are going to be the evidence that stops them permanently. Scene 6.2, The Morrison Business Investigation. Morrison's Garden Center sat on 12 acres of prime commercial land outside downtown Bloomington, the kind of established family business that anchors small communities and generates the sort of local reputation that provides perfect cover for criminal activity. As I pulled into their customer parking lot Thursday afternoon, wind chimes hanging from the storefront entry sang in the December breeze, a cheerful sound that felt grotesque, given what I now knew about this family. The business appeared prosperous and well managed from the outside. Fresh paint, organized plant displays, customers moving through the greenhouse sections with employees providing helpful service. Exactly the sort of operation that would give the Morrison family standing in community organizations, church groups, and local politics. I posed as a potential customer interested in landscape design for a property I was supposedly purchasing, giving me legitimate reasons to ask questions about their services, staffing, and business operations. Intelligence gathering disguised as normal commercial interaction. Victoria Morrison herself approached within minutes, all professional smiles and practiced charm. She was an attractive woman in her late 50s, well-dressed and confident, with the sort of polished presentation that comes from years of customer service experience. "Can I help you find something specific today?" she asked, leading me toward the greenhouse section, where tropical plants created a warm, humid environment that felt welcoming after the Minnesota winter cold. "I'm looking for someone to handle comprehensive landscape design and maintenance for a new property," I said. "Heard through the neighborhood network that you folks do excellent work." "Oh, we do much more than basic landscaping," Victoria said proudly, warming to what she clearly saw as a significant potential sale. "We're a full-service family business. My husband handles insurance consultation and financial planning for customers who need comprehensive property protection. My son Brandon works in banking and can arrange financing for larger projects. And we employ several local teachers for bookkeeping and administrative support because they understand attention to detail." Interesting. Teachers? That seems unusual for a garden center. Yes, they're perfect for administrative work. Actually, our best employee is a young woman who teaches at Oakwood Elementary. Claire Morrison, my daughter-in-law. Brilliant with numbers and absolutely reliable. The sound of a cash register completing transactions echoed from the front office, followed by the mechanical whir of a paper shredder running continuously in the back room. Victoria glanced toward the noise with momentary irritation, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Brandon, turn that thing off while we have customers," she called toward the office. Through the office window, I could see Brandon Morrison feeding documents into an industrial capacity shredder, not the small office model you'd use for routine paperwork, but the kind designed for destroying large volumes of sensitive documents quickly and completely. Bank statements, check copies, financial records, something he clearly didn't want preserved for future examination. He looked up, saw me watching through the window, and quickly closed the office door, but not before I'd gotten a clear view of multiple boxes of documents staged for destruction. "Sorry about that," Victoria said smoothly, her professional demeanor returning instantly. "End-of-year bookkeeping, you know how it is. Tax preparation requires destroying outdated records to make room for current documentation. I knew exactly how it was. They were destroying evidence of their financial crimes, and they were careless enough to do it in front of witnesses during normal business hours. Amateur operational security, the kind of mistake that brings down criminal organizations when they get overconfident. Of course, I said. Actually, speaking of financial services, my property purchase might benefit from insurance consultation. Is your husband available? William's actually meeting with other clients today, but I can have him call you tomorrow to discuss comprehensive coverage options. Perfect. That would be excellent. I'm particularly interested in veterans' benefit protection strategies. Victoria's expression sharpened slightly, and for just a moment, I saw something calculating behind her friendly customer service facade. Oh, are you a veteran? William has extensive experience helping military families maximize their benefit security. Evidence item number 3. Direct admission that William Morrison Sr. specifically targets veteran families for his financial services. But combined with the document destruction I'd witnessed, this established both method and target selection for their criminal operation. I'll look forward to his call, I said, handing her a business card with a contact number that would route directly to Raymond's investigation line. As I left Morrison's garden center that afternoon, I understood that I wasn't just dealing with domestic abuse or even simple financial fraud. The Morrison family was running a sophisticated multi-generational criminal enterprise that used their legitimate business as cover for systematically targeting vulnerable community members. And they'd just made their second major tactical error. They'd tried to recruit the target's father into their operation. The phone call came Friday morning at 0647 hours, while I was reviewing evidence files in my home office, cross-referencing Claire's medical timeline with her financial records and building a comprehensive prosecution brief. The call ID showed U.S. MOPIS, Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Inspector General, which got my immediate attention. Mr. Pennington, this is Agent Sarah Hendricks, VA OIG Criminal Investigation Division. We need to discuss some unusual activity on your veterans' benefit accounts that's triggered our automated fraud detection systems. The fluorescent light above my desk hummed steadily as I sat straighter in my chair, military instincts kicking in immediately. When federal agents call at dawn about your benefits, it's never routine administrative business. What kind of activity, Agent Hendricks? Someone has been attempting to access your pension and disability payment information using what appears to be legitimately obtained power of attorney documents. The access attempts originated from a computer system registered to Morrison Insurance Services, operated by one William Morrison Sr. My blood ran cold. They weren't just stealing from Claire. They were targeting my veterans' benefits, too. The systematic nature of their operation was becoming clear. Identify families with predictable government income streams, establish control over vulnerable family members, then expand access to all available financial resources. Agent Hendricks, I need to inform you that I'm currently conducting a civilian investigation of the Morrison family for financial crimes and domestic abuse against my daughter. This sounds directly related to what I've already documented. The sound of papers shuffling came through the phone, followed by keyboard clicks as she accessed what I assumed were federal database records. Mr. Pennington, we've been tracking Morrison Insurance Services for 8 months as part of a broader investigation into veteran benefit fraud. William Morrison Sr. has used his insurance industry credentials and access to attempt fraudulent claims against 23 veteran families across 3 states. Your case might provide the evidence we need to build a comprehensive federal prosecution. I pulled out my notebook, adding this information to my growing evidence matrix. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. Financial records, medical documentation, witness statements, surveillance footage. We're prepared to open a joint investigation with local police, FBI Financial Crimes Unit, and the Department of Defense Criminal Investigation Division. The scope was expanding beyond anything I'd initially imagined. Agent Hendricks, exactly how large is this operation? Preliminary estimates suggest Morrison Sr. has attempted to fraudulently access or redirect over $340,000 in veteran benefits over the past 3 years. But we've never had a case where we could prove the family connection and systematic abuse pattern. Your daughter's situation provides the personal victim testimony that makes this prosecutable under federal racketeering statutes. Evidence item number 4: federal investigation confirming systematic criminal operation targeting veterans, establishing pattern of criminal behavior across multiple states and jurisdictions, escalating local domestic abuse case to federal racketeering prosecution. After hanging up, I sat in my office for several minutes, processing the implications. Claire wasn't just a domestic abuse victim, she was a strategic asset in a federal criminal investigation that could take down an entire family-based criminal organization. The Morrison family had escalated this from local crime to federal racketeering. They had no idea that they'd just provided federal prosecutors with everything needed to destroy them completely. Sunday after the 10 o'clock service at Bloomington Community Church, I sat in my truck outside Oakwood Elementary, watching Claire's colleagues exit the building after their weekend curriculum planning session. The school parking lot was nearly empty. Just a few cars belonging to teachers who were dedicating their Sunday to preparing lessons for the coming week. I needed to understand how deep the Morrison influence went in the local community, and specifically, how they'd managed to undermine Claire's professional reputation while simultaneously destroying her personal life. Systematic isolation requires community cooperation, either willing or manipulated. Principal Janet Summers approached my truck window with concern written across her face when she recognized me. Janet had been Claire's principal for 3 years, and I'd met her multiple times at school events and parent-teacher conferences back when Claire felt safe enough to invite family to her professional functions. "Harvey, is everything all right with Claire? She's missed 3 curriculum planning meetings this month, and that's very unlike her." "What have you heard about her situation, Janet?" Janet's expression grew careful, the way people look when they're navigating potentially sensitive family information they're not sure they should share. "Well, Victoria Morrison spoke with me after the November school board meeting. She mentioned that Claire's been struggling with some significant mental health challenges and that the family's been trying to provide support. But what? Harvey, I probably shouldn't repeat what might be confidential family information, but Victoria suggested that Claire's been experiencing some kind of emotional breakdown. Said she's been acting paranoid about money, making accusations against family members, behaving erratically at home. Victoria was actually asking about medical leave options for teachers experiencing psychological crises." The pieces of their strategy clicked into place with crystalline clarity. While systematically abusing Claire at home and stealing her income, the Morrisons were simultaneously building a community narrative that would explain any attempts she might make to seek help or report their crimes. Classic gaslighting extended to the community level. "Janet, has anyone filed official complaints about Claire's teaching performance? Or are these just rumors being circulated by the Morrison family?" "Well, no formal complaints have been filed with the district. But when a respected family like the Morrisons expresses concern about a teacher's stability..." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the implication. I pulled out my phone and showed her the hospital records from Christmas Eve, scrolling through the medical photography documentation that told the real story of Claire's condition. "Janet, this is what Claire's been dealing with. Not mental health issues, systematic domestic abuse and financial fraud." Janet's face went pale as she scrolled through the medical documentation, her hands trembling slightly as the reality of the situation became clear. "Oh my God, Harvey! We had no idea she's been covering for them? They've been threatening her into silence while simultaneously destroying her reputation to prevent anyone from believing her if she did speak up. It's sophisticated psychological warfare disguised as family concern. What can we do? How can the school support her? Janet, I need you to document everything Victoria Morrison told you about Claire's supposed mental health issues. Dates, exact quotes if you remember them, who else was present, and I need to know if other Morrison family members have had similar conversations with school personnel. Janet nodded, pulling out her own phone to start taking notes. Harvey, if what you're showing me is true, then Victoria Morrison deliberately lied to school administration to damage Claire's professional standing. That's not just family manipulation, that's potential slander affecting her career. Evidence item number 5, documented community manipulation campaign designed to isolate victim and prevent effective help seeking, including false statements to employer designed to damage professional reputation and create pretext for forced medical leave. Janet, one more question. Have any other teachers or school families mentioned financial problems or family conflicts that seemed unusual? Particularly anyone who might have connections to Morrison Insurance Services or Morrison's Garden Center? Janet's expression grew thoughtful, then concerned. Actually, yes. Sarah Patterson in 4th grade mentioned that her husband's veteran disability benefits were delayed for months due to some kind of administrative review. And the Hendersons, whose daughter is in Claire's class, said they'd had trouble with their homeowner's insurance after some kind of complicated claim process. The Morrison operation was larger than I'd initially understood, with tentacles reaching throughout the community's financial infrastructure. They weren't just targeting my family. They were systematically exploiting their business relationships to identify and victimize vulnerable community members. But their biggest mistake was assuming that a small-town reputation for respectability would protect them from federal criminal investigation. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The Hennepin County Attorney's conference room smelled like leather and coffee when I arrived Monday morning at 0900 hours, carrying 3 organized evidence boxes that represented 48 hours of intensive documentation and analysis. The conference table was polished mahogany, surrounded by high-backed chairs that suggested serious legal business was conducted here regularly. Federal agent Sarah Hendricks was already present, along with Detective Raymond Collins and Assistant District Attorney Michael Chen. The sight of federal and local law enforcement coordinating in one room told me everything I needed to know about how seriously they were taking this case. Mr. Pennington, 8A Chen said, as I arranged my documentation on the table with military precision, Agent Hendricks has briefed me on the federal angles of this investigation. What you've documented here represents one of the most comprehensive civilian evidence collections we've seen in a domestic abuse case with financial crime components. I opened the first evidence box, revealing organized binders with color-coded tabs, digital storage devices labeled with evidence tags, and printed summaries cross-referenced by date, crime type, and legal relevance. Financial fraud spanning 18 months, systematically documented with chain of custody maintained, medical records, establishing clear pattern of abuse, correlating with financial cycles, video surveillance legally obtained from private property, federal investigation into prior criminal activity targeting veteran families across multiple states. Agent Hendricks leaned forward, examining my evidence organization with what I recognized as professional respect. Harvey, this is better documentation than most FBI financial crimes units produce during formal investigations. Where did you learn civilian evidence collection procedures? 82nd Airborne, 2 tours. Iraq, specialized in intelligence analysis and criminal investigation of supply chain fraud and contractor corruption. When you're building cases that determine whether soldiers live or die, you learn to be thorough enough for any legal standard. The sound of pages turning filled the conference room as the legal team reviewed my evidence systematically. Every document was numbered, cross-referenced, backed up in multiple formats, and organized according to federal evidence presentation standards. Detective Collins tapped his pen against his notepad in a rhythm that suggested he was processing multiple angles simultaneously. Harvey, based on what you've documented here, we're looking at multiple felony charges across state and federal jurisdictions: domestic violence, financial elder abuse, identity theft, tax fraud, computer fraud, and now federal racketeering under the RICO Act. Are you prepared for what this means in terms of publicity, legal complexity, and potential retaliation? I thought about Claire shivering in 12-degree snow on Christmas Eve while her in-laws celebrated warmly inside their house. I thought about 23 other veteran families who'd been victimized by this same criminal organization. I thought about how many other vulnerable people the Morrison family might target if this operation continued. I'm prepared for justice, Detective. Complete, systematic, and permanent. Agent Hendricks spread out a federal investigation timeline on the conference table, showing the scope of Morrison Sr.'s criminal activity across 3 states over multiple years. The federal task force has been trying to build a prosecutable case against this organization for 18 months, but we've never had a victim willing to testify and evidence comprehensive enough for RICO prosecution. Your daughter's case provides both. Ada Chen reviewed the medical evidence, financial documentation, and community manipulation materials I'd assembled. Harvey, this isn't just a domestic abuse case anymore. What you've documented shows systematic criminal enterprise using legitimate business operations as cover for multiple felony activities. Federal prosecutors are going to want this case. Good, I said, because I want prosecution that ensures this never happens to another family. One more thing, Agent Hendricks said, pulling out a federal court authorization document. We've gotten approval for electronic surveillance and financial monitoring of all Morrison family accounts and communications. If they're still actively committing crimes, we'll have real-time evidence of ongoing criminal activity. The meeting concluded with a clear tactical plan. Federal task force would coordinate with local authorities for simultaneous arrest warrants, asset seizure, and evidence preservation. My role would be supporting the prosecution as primary witness coordinator and evidence presenter. For the first time since finding Claire in the snow, I felt the tactical advantage shifting decisively in our favor. Nancy Rodriguez sat across from me at Corner Coffee Wednesday morning, hands wrapped around her mug like it was anchoring her to something stable in a world that had become suddenly dangerous. The ambient noise of espresso machines, quiet conversations, and soft music provided perfect cover for the conversation we needed to have. Harvey, there's more you need to know, she said, leaning forward and speaking just above a whisper. Miguel came home yesterday shaking like he'd seen a ghost. Victoria Morrison called him to the garden center for what she said was routine winter service planning, but it wasn't routine at all. I pulled out my phone, setting the voice recording app between us on the small cafe table. Nancy, I need you to tell me everything, and I need your consent to record this conversation for potential legal use in federal court. She nodded without hesitation, her resolve stronger than I'd expected. Yes, record it. People need to know what this family is really like. Taking a deep breath, she began. Victoria told Miguel that if he or I cooperated with any investigation involving Claire, they wouldn't just cancel his landscaping contract. She threatened to report him to Immigration and Customs Enforcement for violations, claiming they had evidence he was employing undocumented workers. The coffee shop noise faded into background as I processed this escalation. Nancy, how long has Miguel been a legal resident? 15 years. He's got permanent residency, pays taxes, everything completely legal. But Victoria threatened to file false reports anyway, saying that even if the charges didn't stick, the investigation process would destroy his business and possibly get him deported while things got sorted out. This was federal witness tampering, intimidation, and filing false federal reports, serious felony charges that would add years to any eventual prosecution. Did she say anything else? She bragged about how they'd handled other neighbors who'd gotten too curious about family business. Said they'd used similar threats against the Patterson family when they asked questions about why Claire looked so thin last summer, and that they had resources to make life difficult for anyone who interfered with their family matters. Nancy reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind students use for lectures. Harvey, I recorded our conversation when she came to our house Sunday night after church. She came right to our front door and threatened us again. And this time she said things about Claire's money that I don't think she meant to admit. With trembling hands, she offered me her earphones. Victoria Morrison's voice was clear and unmistakable. That little teacher makes decent money for someone so young, and Brandon has financial obligations that require steady income. She'll learn to be grateful for family support and contribute appropriately, or she'll learn what happens to ungrateful wives who don't respect family hierarchy. The recording continued. Miguel, your landscaping contract depends on your family understanding that what happens in the Morrison household is private family business. Other neighbors have learned that lesson already, and I trust you're smart enough to learn it without requiring more direct persuasion. Evidence item number 6, recorded confession by primary suspect, admitting to financial exploitation of victim, explicit threats against witnesses, and pattern of community intimidation designed to prevent law enforcement cooperation. Nancy, I said carefully, are you and Miguel prepared to testify in federal court, knowing that this might require witness protection protocols? Miguel's terrified, she said honestly, but we talked about it all night after Victoria left. We can't let them keep hurting Claire, and we can't let them think they can threaten every family in this neighborhood into silence. She pulled out a manila envelope containing additional materials. There's more, Harvey. Miguel's been keeping records of all his work for the Morrison family for tax purposes, and some of what they've had him do doesn't make sense for normal landscaping. The record showed Miguel had been paid to install sophisticated outdoor lighting systems with motion detection and audio recording capabilities around the Morrison property, essentially a surveillance network designed to monitor anyone approaching their house. He'd also been paid to dispose of large quantities of shredded documents through his commercial waste service, far more paper destruction than any normal family business would generate. They've been using Miguel's services to build counter-surveillance systems and destroy evidence, I realized. Nancy, this proves they knew their activities were criminal and were taking sophisticated steps to avoid detection. And the courage of ordinary people choosing to do the right thing, despite personal cost, never failed to remind me why some fights are worth taking, regardless of the risks involved. The federal courthouse in Minneapolis echoed with the sound of my dress shoes against polished marble as I walked toward the witness stand Thursday morning at 1,000 hours. Judge Patricia Kellerman's courtroom was smaller than I had expected, but carried the weight of federal authority in every detail, from the American flag positioned behind the bench to the court reporter's precise keystrokes, recording every word for permanent legal record. Mr. Pennington, Assistant U.S. Attorney Lisa Wang began, her voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that comes from prosecuting complex federal cases. Please tell the court how you first became aware of the defendant's criminal activities targeting your family. I looked toward the defense table, where Brandon, Victoria, and William Morrison Sr. sat with their legal team, 3 attorneys in expensive suits who'd clearly been preparing for this moment since the federal indictments were announced. Brandon wouldn't meet my eyes, staring at his hands folded on the table. Victoria stared at me with pure, undisguised hatred. William Morrison Sr. looked like a man who'd finally realized that decades of criminal behavior had caught up with him in the worst possible way. On December 24th at approximately 11:30 p.m., I found my daughter Claire suffering from hypothermia outside the Morrison family residence. She had been locked out of the house in 12-degree weather for over 2 hours while the family celebrated Christmas Eve inside. The prosecution presented evidence methodically, building their case with the same systematic precision I'd used to document the crimes. Medical records were projected on large courtroom screens, showing the pattern of Claire's injuries correlating with her pay schedule. Financial statements demonstrated the systematic theft of her teaching salary. Video surveillance from Nancy Rodriguez's security cameras showed the abuse incidents and recorded confessions. When Agent Hendricks took the stand, her testimony expanded the case beyond my family's victimization. Investigation reveals that defendant William Morrison Sr. used his insurance industry credentials and access to attempt fraud against 23 veteran families over 8 years across 3 states, stealing an estimated $340,000 in benefits through forged power of attorney documents and fraudulent claim submissions. The defense attorney's cross-examination was aggressive, but ultimately pointless. The evidence was overwhelming, documented with military precision, and corroborated by multiple independent sources, including federal investigations, medical professionals, and witness testimony. Every question they asked only reinforced the systematic nature of the criminal enterprise. Dr. Martinez testified about Claire's medical treatment and the pattern of injuries that had triggered mandatory reporting requirements. Nancy Rodriguez courageously described the threats against her family and played the recorded confessions that captured Victoria Morrison admitting to financial exploitation. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for since Christmas Eve. Brandon Morrison took the stand in his own defense, and under pressure from federal prosecutors, the facade finally cracked completely. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice breaking as federal charges and decades of potential prison time became real. "But I owed money to some very dangerous people from gambling debts, and my father said he had a proven system that worked with other families. Claire was supposed to just cooperate with the family financial arrangements. We didn't expect her father to have the skills to fight back like this." And the gavel echoed through the courtroom as Judge Kellerman called for order, but the damage was done. Brandon Morrison had just confessed to deliberately targeting my daughter for financial exploitation as part of an ongoing family criminal enterprise. In that moment, listening to my daughter's husband confess to systematically destroying her life for gambling money and describing it as just business, I felt something I hadn't experienced since coming home from Iraq. Complete, overwhelming tactical victory. The local news van doors slammed shut outside Morrison's Garden Center as I pulled into the parking lot Friday morning, the sound echoing across the empty commercial space like a funeral bell. Camera crews were setting up equipment, while reporters interviewed customers who'd driven here specifically to demand refunds and express their outrage at having supported a criminal enterprise disguised as a family business. A growing pile of protest signs leaned against the chain-link fence surrounding the property. "Justice for veterans, protect our teachers, Morrison family, apes criminals." The "closed permanently" sign hanging crooked in the winter wind felt like the most appropriate epitaph possible for a business built on systematic fraud and community manipulation. Inside the federal courthouse an hour later, Judge Kellerman read the sentences with judicial precision that made each word feel like a hammer blow of justice. Brandon Morrison, 5 years federal prison for domestic abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy. Victoria Morrison, 3 years federal prison for witness tampering, conspiracy, and intimidation. William Morrison Sr., 12 years federal prison for racketeering, elder abuse targeting veterans, and operating criminal enterprise across state lines. Claire sat beside me in the gallery, wearing her best teaching dress, and holding my hand as justice was finally comprehensively served. Her color had fully returned, her eyes were clear and focused, and for the first time in over a year, she looked like the confident, capable woman I'd raised her to be. The court also orders full restitution of $34,600 to victim Claire Morrison, plus punitive damages of $50,000, Judge Kellerman continued. Additionally, all Morrison family assets will be liquidated under federal supervision to provide restitution to the 23 veteran families defrauded by defendant William Morrison Sr.'s insurance fraud scheme, with total restitution estimated at $340,000. After the hearing, the courthouse hallway filled with people whose lives had been touched by this case, some who'd been victimized by the Morrison family, others who'd supported our fight for justice. Principal Janet Summers approached us immediately. "Claire, the school board met yesterday evening," she said, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "We're offering you the department head position for elementary education next fall, with a formal written apology from the district for not recognizing the signs of what you were experiencing." The click of her heels on the courthouse marble was joined by other footsteps as community members approached. Neighbors, teachers, parents who'd believed the Morrison family's lies, but now understood the truth. Nancy Rodriguez hugged Claire tightly, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry we didn't speak up sooner," she whispered. "We were afraid, but that's no excuse." "You spoke up when it mattered most," Claire replied, her voice steady and strong. "That's what real courage looks like, doing the right thing even when it's dangerous." The federal prosecutor, Ada Wang, approached with final legal documents. Claire, you should know that your case has prompted a federal task force investigation into family based financial fraud operations targeting vulnerable populations. Your testimony may help protect hundreds of other families from similar victimization. Standing in that courthouse hallway, watching my daughter reclaim her life and dignity while justice was served on the people who'd nearly destroyed her, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my military service ended. The satisfaction of a mission completed successfully, with objectives achieved and innocent people protected. 6 months later, I sat in the back of Claire's second-grade classroom at Oakwood Elementary, watching her teach a lesson on community helpers to 24 bright-eyed 7-year-olds. Her voice was strong and confident, filled with the joy and passion for teaching I remembered from her college graduation when she told me her dream was to make learning magical for children. The classroom walls were covered with student artwork, colorful displays of their writing projects, and photos from field trips that showed Claire laughing and engaged with her students. This was her domain again, a place where she had authority, respect, and the ability to make a positive difference in young lives. The school bell rang, signaling morning recess, and children's laughter filled the hallway as they rushed outside to play. Claire approached my desk with a smile I hadn't seen in over 2 years, genuine happiness that reached her eyes and transformed her entire face. "How did I do, Dad?" "Like the teacher you've always been," I said, standing to hug her. "These kids are lucky to have you." Her divorce had been finalized in March. Her teaching position was secure with full back pay and the department head promotion, and the community support had been overwhelming. Parents specifically requested her classroom for their children, understanding that she was someone who'd overcome adversity and emerged stronger. More importantly, she was getting professional counseling and rebuilding her life on her own terms, without anyone controlling her finances, monitoring her communications, or undermining her professional reputation. "I have news," she said, pulling out an official letter with federal government letterhead. "The Department of Veterans Affairs called this morning. They want to hire me as a victim advocate coordinator, helping other military families identify and report financial fraud. Apparently, my case helped them develop new protection protocols for veteran benefit security." I read the letter over her shoulder, noting the significant salary increase and the opportunity for her to travel to other states, training local law enforcement and victim advocacy groups. "Claire, this is incredible. You're turning your trauma into protection for other families." She nodded, her voice filled with quiet determination. "Dad, I can't undo what happened to me, but I can make sure other people don't go through it alone. And I can make sure they have someone who understands exactly what systematic family abuse looks like." I thought about Grace, my wife who'd passed 3 years earlier, and how proud she would be of our daughter's strength, resilience, and commitment to helping others. Claire hadn't just survived the Morrison family's systematic destruction of her life. She'd emerged as someone with unique expertise in recognizing and combating the kind of crimes they'd committed. "Your mother would be so proud of you," I said, feeling Grace's presence in this moment of triumph. Claire reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small framed photo. Grace, Claire, and me at Claire's college graduation, all of us laughing at something I couldn't remember, but that had obviously been wonderful. "I kept this hidden from Brandon and his family for 2 years," she said. "It was the only picture they didn't make me remove from my apartment. I hid it in my desk at school because I knew they'd never think to look here." She placed the photo on her desk, where students and visitors could see it, a declaration that she was reclaiming her family history and her right to display the people she loved. "Claire, I need you to know something," I said. "When I found you in the snow that night, I was afraid I'd lost you forever, not just to hypothermia, but to whatever had broken your spirit so completely. Seeing you here now, stronger than ever and helping other people, this is the best possible outcome of everything we went through. Dad, thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. But more than that, thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. It's not about overpowering people or controlling them. It's about protecting the people you love and standing up for what's right." "That's what fathers do," I said. We protect our families even when the enemy wears a familiar face and has community respect. And Claire, we protect them so completely that they never have to fear those enemies again. As I sit here today, 9 months after finding my daughter shivering in the snow on Christmas Eve, I want you to understand something that law enforcement officials, victim advocates, and federal investigators have confirmed through this case. Financial abuse and family manipulation aren't isolated incidents affecting just a few unlucky families. They're systematic criminal operations that thrive in silence, isolation, and community assumptions about respectability. The Morrison family's criminal enterprise victimized 23 veteran families, multiple teachers, and countless neighbors who were intimidated into silence through economic threats. They operated successfully for over 8 years because they understood that communities trust familiar faces, local businesses, and families with established reputations. When families weaponize money, reputation, and social standing against vulnerable members, the community becomes an unwitting accomplice unless people choose to ask uncomfortable questions and document what they observe. Claire's case wasn't unique in its methods, only in its resolution. Federal investigation revealed that financial fraud targeting veterans, teachers, and other people with predictable government income has become increasingly sophisticated, often involving legitimate businesses as cover for systematic theft and identity fraud. If you recognize warning signs in your own community, sudden social isolation of family members, financial control disguised as family support, reputation campaigns designed to undermine potential victims, or businesses that seem to target specific populations for special services, don't assume someone else will handle it. Document what you see. Support the victims, even when community pressure suggests they're causing problems. Then report suspected crimes to appropriate authorities. And remember that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who attend church regularly, sponsor little league teams, and maintain beautiful business operations. The truth has a way of surfacing when good people choose courage over comfort, and when systematic documentation replaces community assumptions. Veterans, teachers, and other community pillars deserve protection from financial predators, even when those predators have spent decades building reputations that make their crimes seem impossible. More importantly, every vulnerable person deserves to know that systematic abuse, whether physical, financial, or psychological, can be stopped when the right people decide to fight back with the right methods. Claire is now helping other military families identify and report financial fraud through her work with the VA. Nancy Rodriguez has become a community advocate for immigrant families facing intimidation. The federal task force investigation sparked by this case has led to prosecutions in 12 other states. Justice served through proper channels doesn't just punish criminals, it creates systems that protect future victims. Have you seen signs of financial control or systematic isolation in your family or community? How can we better protect veterans, teachers, and other vulnerable adults from predatory schemes disguised as family support or business services? And if this story resonated with you, you might want to hear about the teacher who vanished from PTA meetings after marrying into a prominent local family, or the Army veteran who discovered why his daughter was always having accidents after payday. Because sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign soil or in distant conflicts, but in our own neighborhoods against enemies who smile at community barbecues and contribute to local charities, while systematically destroying lives behind closed doors. Justice served, mission complete, family protected. The Pennington family is stronger than ever, and the Morrison criminal enterprise has been permanently dismantled. That's how you fight back when predators target your family. With systematic documentation, strategic patience, and the absolute determination to protect the people you love from anyone who would harm them.